Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about when we might see the next Nintendo Direct. And no, I'm not talking about the April 2nd Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, but rather a final big Switch 1 Direct. When might this happen? Many have been thinking February, but when in February exactly could it be happening? Well, there are different things going on that are certainly leading to some debate, and that's what we're going to get into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 comes out, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe and hit that notification bell. So there are some people who think the next Nintendo Direct will be in the first full week of February, next week. And why is that exactly? Well, firstly, it's because we have the journalist PH Brazil, who has told us multiple times over the last few months that there is another Direct happening in February. So there's already an expectation of a February Direct based off PH Brazil's reporting, but also the historical record of Nintendo Direct shows us that pretty much every February there is some kind of Nintendo Direct. But the reason some think it's happening specifically next week has to do with Nintendo's scheduled maintenance. So looking here on Twitter, as we see explained by Switch 2 Stock, Nintendo Direct February 4th or 5th, previous maintenances and Direct, maintenance September 12th and Direct September 13th, 2022, maintenance and Direct on September 14th, 2023, maintenance and Direct on June 18th, 2024. And so what they're getting at here is that whenever there's maintenance, there is a higher probability of there being a Direct to follow soon after. This does not happen every time, just so we're clear. They're showing examples of when it has happened. There are times when we've seen scheduled maintenance and nothing actually happens. However, it has happened with some level of regularity, so definitely I think it is something worth talking about here. And so the next scheduled maintenance is for Tuesday, February 4th, and it ends on February 4th. So potentially, all the maintenance will be done, and then on February 5th, maybe Nintendo will have a Direct on that day. But interestingly, there is this Twitter user, NintenStatusBot, that archives all the Nintendo maintenance updates. And here, as you see, they've pointed out that there is maintenance scheduled for transferring your save data, and transferring your user data, and also network services. But the network services one happens a little bit later. And so here's some speculation for you. Remember the Nintendo playtest program? What if Nintendo is going to have some network service maintenance because they're going to be taking advantage of their network to run this playtest program, but not as a playtest program, but as the actual game? And perhaps we'll see an announcement on this in this Direct maybe next week. And so we're clear, I'm not predicting this is what is going to happen, I'm simply mentioning it as a possibility. And so with that said, do I think that there is going to be a Direct next week? And to be honest with you, I am not sure. As I already explained, while there are times that it seems like the maintenance does line up with the Nintendo Direct, it is not every time. And while I also do think there will be a Direct in February, I am not sure next week is necessarily the best time. You might think, well, there's also a Nintendo shareholders meeting next week on the 4th. That is true. There is a 9-month earnings release, and potentially we could see some news around then. But if you look at their other earnings releases just right here immediately, on November 5th there wasn't a Nintendo Direct or around then, and then for the 3-month earnings release there was not a Direct on August 2nd either. There were Directs that happened in August. There was the Museum Direct a couple weeks later, and then there was the big Indie World Plus Partner Showcase Direct at the end of the month. And so I simply say this to point out that there isn't really that much of a correlation with earnings releases and Nintendo Direct announcements. So outside of the maintenance scheduling, I'm not sure why we should expect a Direct next week. At this point in time, there have been no insiders that have been suggesting that a Direct is happening next week. It is Friday, and Pioro hasn't said anything, and while Pioro may not have as much access to information as they've had in the past, they have still shown to have pretty good information and being aware of things, so if there was to be a Direct next week, they might already be tipping us off to some kind of announcement next week, even if it wasn't like a big first-party game, maybe some sort of third-party offering, which they've been better at over the last few months. And there's been nothing on that yet. So I'm skeptical of the Direct happening next week. But there are some other considerations to be made here. On January 16th, Daybreak said here on Family Boards, "Are you still thinking a partner is most likely, or are you now thinking a general Direct?" And here, PH Brazil here on Family, "I'm now leaning harder towards a general than it was back in November." And so I think this is actually something very interesting that's being said here. And to be clear, Brazil is not saying that he knows 100% that the Direct is going to be a general. He's simply expressing his opinion. However, Brazil's opinion is an informed opinion. He probably knows some things behind the scenes that leads him into this direction. And as he's also discussed in the past, he has heard about one more big Switch 1 game. That would be a Nintendo game. And so when you take that into consideration, first-party games aren't really a part of partner showcases. So that may be why Brazil's leaning in this direction of it being more so a general than a partner. But I also want to point out another possibility here, something between a partner and something between a big general, and that's just the good old Nintendo Direct Mini. Nintendo Direct Minis still have first-party announcements, but there aren't as many big brand new first-party announcements. There might be more of a focus on remasters and such, maybe something new but not as much as a big general, and still a variety of third-party things as you would see in a partner, but it's a little bit more of a mix. With the big Switch 2 Direct coming on April 2nd, a Nintendo Direct Mini seems a bit more believable to me. But the good news is, whether it's a general or a mini, it does seem like it's less likely to be a partner, meaning we could be getting some first-party Nintendo announcements for Switch 1 in this month of February. And if that's the case, that does lead me in a particular direction. Is there going to be a Nintendo-published title for February? Nintendo usually has some sort of published title from them every single month. There are some exceptions, but February oftentimes has something, and here we are with nothing. But Nintendo could easily remedy this by having a Direct and shadow dropping some sort of title. And what's interesting is that actually, we go back to February 2023, where they had an early February Direct, earlier than usual, February 8th, and in this Direct, guess what was shadow dropped? Metroid Prime Remastered, and then a few weeks later, the physical version came out. February 22nd to be exact. And so from this perspective, if Nintendo's going to do something similar to what they did back in 2023 with a shadow drop, maybe even it having to do with another Metroid title, maybe Metroid Prime 2, and also possibly 3, where they are shadow dropped digitally, so you can play them on the same day of the Direct from the eShop, but a few weeks later, if you're interested in the physical version, you can pick them up. And so if we have a Direct in early February, then there's still some more time to release the game physically a few weeks later, still in the month of February, and making good on this idea of having consistent published titles every single month. And to add a little bit more smoke to this fire of what may be a Nintendo Direct, Good Smile here posted, "Time to kick some butt. Kirby's Robobot armor is back, powered up, and ready to roll in the Nendoroid More line. Save the world by adding this mechanized hero to your shelf. Pre-orders are open now," and as you can see, we have this really awesome figurine of Kirby from Kirby Planet Robobot here. And for those that don't know, there is a rumor coming from Nate the Hate, in other words, a credible rumor, that Kirby Planet Robobot is going to be remastered for Nintendo Switch, and typically these kinds of announcements we would see announced in the early part of the year, so it does make sense to see some sort of Kirby game, Kirby Planet Robobot, we would assume, in a Nintendo Direct. And so this figurine seeing a re-release might have something to do with that. Of course, it could also be them anticipating an announcement because it is rumored. Something else that's happened recently that might be helping to stir the pot for this Nintendo Direct conversation is the recent announcement for Forza Horizon 5 for PlayStation 5. Now, why is this relevant? Well, the reason why it might be relevant is because Forza Horizon 5 is rumored to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2 as well. And it's not just this, there are several other games that are rumored to be coming to both PS5 and Nintendo Switch 2. Halo Master Chief Collection, Gears of War Ultimate Edition, and as Vandal has recently reported, other games such as Starfield, Fable, and even Killer Instinct. But these would be for Nintendo Switch 2, not Nintendo Switch 1, so it seems unlikely that we would see any of these games announced for an upcoming Direct in February. However, given that we just got an announcement for Forza Horizon 5 recently, and when we go back to last year around this time, there were Xbox announcements for both PlayStation and Nintendo, possibly there may be some sort of Xbox or Microsoft published title that could still come to Switch 1. What would it be? I'm not sure, maybe none at all, but I'm simply mentioning it because it is part of the conversation. And so here's my expectation. I think maybe there could be a Direct next week, but I'm not fully committed to the idea until we see a little bit more corroboration from some insiders or some extra evidence here. But I do think a Direct still is going to happen very soon, and I'm thinking if not next week, perhaps the week after is our best bet. This would be 2 weeks before the end of the month where we would see, presumably, a Pokemon Presents where we usually see the Pokemon Presents. So a 2-week gap there is healthy, and there would still be enough time in the month to announce a Shadow Drop game and maybe still have a physical release come out a few weeks later, still in the month of February. And it would still be relatively early, and there'd be somewhat of a healthy gap there between this Direct, the Pokemon Presents, and the bigger Switch 2 Direct in the beginning of April. If somehow we go through next week and the week after and there's still no announcement of a Direct, I guess we could still see one in that week before the final week where we would presumably see the Pokemon Presents. I'd be a little bit surprised, but of course, stranger things have happened. Really though, I am looking at 4 specific dates here. If somehow it does end up being next week, even though there's no insiders suggesting so, and this time the maintenance does line up with an actual Direct, then I think we're looking at either the 4th or the 5th. Looking at recent years, Nintendo Directs have, for the most part, been happening on either a Tuesday or a Wednesday, which does place us on the 4th or the 5th. If it ends up being the 4th, I would assume it's because it's a mini or a partner and it's Shadow Dropped. If it's on the 5th, it's because they actually do announce it ahead of time, regardless of what it actually ends up being. I am, however, more so leaning in the direction of it being the week afterwards, so on the 10th or the 11th, mainly because we don't normally see Directs as early as the 4th or the 5th, and if we wait any longer beyond the 2nd week of February, then we're getting very close to the Pokemon Presents and less time to have a Shadow Drop announcement that could also see a physical release in the same month. But what do you all think? When do you expect to see this apparent February Nintendo Direct? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.